So, what your waist can tell you about your erections. So, waist circumference, something easy to measure, and erection quality, also something easy to measure. That's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to the channel. It's Dr. Debra Durst, and I specialize in regenerative medicine, hormones, and sexual wellness. So, let's get into it. So, waist circumference is one of the easiest things to measure. And we'll talk about how to measure it, what it indicates if it's bigger or a specific size, and then what that means metabolically for you. And then we're going to focus a little bit on insulin and fasting insulin because that's also an easy thing to measure. So basically, the waist circumference, if you're at the top of the hip bone or the iliac crest, you're going to measure around, but you're going to fully exhale to get that measurement around in just a loose tape measure. You don't want to do it too tight, but definitely here is where you want to measure it. And so if you're less than 37, then that puts you at no risk. But if you're 38 to 40 inches, then it puts you at an increased risk. And this is for a man. And then greater than 40 inches, that's a higher risk. And so basically being able to measure that if it's higher, so again, under 37 being normal, but anything above that kind of indicates that there's some visceral fat going on. So we have subcutaneous fat, which is underneath the skin, but then we have visceral fat that surrounds the organs. And so if your waist is starting to get enlarged, but everything else isn't kind of grossly enlarging with it, then that usually indicates that there's some kind of metabolic dysfunction going on and some visceral fat. And so some metrics that we can watch with that again is obviously the waist circumference, that's one of them. A waist to height, so being less than 5, so waist less than half of your height. Fasting glucose, anything above 100, but we're going to dive into that in a little more granular detail because that's important and an easy thing to measure. Triglycerides less than 150, HDL less than 40, and blood pressure over 130/85. And so basically, those are little things that you can look at, and some of those include blood work. But when we're talking about a fasting blood sugar, you're talking about anytime you get your blood drawn, if you get a CMP or a comprehensive metabolic panel, that should have a glucose. So you should do all your blood work fasted just so you can have a fasting blood glucose and know what that means. Because 85 is ideal. And essentially, even if you're within the normal range, it still could increase your risk of insulin resistance. And what insulin resistance means is there is a point in insulin handling where you handle it normally and you have no diabetes, or you're diabetic on the other end of the spectrum. And in between is this insulin resistance where it's not working as well and your blood sugars start to elevate. And so do your insulin levels at that point. So your fasting blood sugar can kind of give you an indication of that insulin resistant range. And so basically, if it's less than 85, that's optimal. And that's efficient insulin signaling. There's actually a percentage, and you can actually go up even in that normal range. So if you're 86 to 90 for a fasting blood glucose, then you're 2 times the risk of developing insulin resistance. If it's 91 to 95 in a fasting, you're 4 to 5 times the risk. And ED begins around that time. So again, waist circumference being one of those things you can look at. And if you're the 38 to 40 and definitely above 40, that you are at increased risk for erectile dysfunction because you have some unhealthy metabolic things going on. And so the fasting blood glucose is another one. And a lot of people will do the continuous glucose monitors now. And when you get up in the morning, you can kind of see where your fasting blood glucose is. And these are things you can always improve with different lifestyle changes. So just know it doesn't matter where you are over the next year, you want to make changes in progress. And so basically, if you are above that 85, your risk goes up, but the ED risk starts to develop around 91 to 95 fasting blood glucose. And so obviously, if you're at 4 or 5 times the risk of insulin resistance development, when you're 91 to 95, you can clearly see that that risk goes up exponentially. So basically, getting that blood glucose, that fasting blood glucose down is super important. And for erections, what happens is the penis has the smallest vessels in the body. So they're 1 to 2 millimeters, 3 to 4 for coronary arteries, larger than that for carotid. So basically, they're the smallest blood vessels in the body. So if you have any kind of metabolic dysfunction or you have elevated blood glucose, you just have an endothelium and blood flow that isn't normal to those small vessels. That's what puts you at increased risk for not having the blood flow necessary for a really hard erection. So hopefully that gives you a little layout of something you can measure at home, something you can easily get measured by your doctor, and just how to assess those measurements so that it lowers your risk of ever having anything wrong with your erections. So hopefully that helps. Let me know. Let's start a comment or let's start a conversation in the comments. Just drop them in there and let me know if there's anything else you want to hear about, because I am willing to deep dive into anything sexual wellness or wellness. Thank you.